had a good upbringing. I wasn't abused as a kid. Wonderful wife, family, and kids. I had it all, and I lost it all. This could have been avoided, but it could happen to anyone. Now I'm taking the steps I need towards getting my life back.
Turn to a more healthful environment. At Prelude, we help people realize their full potential and openly welcome those who suffer from substance abuse.
Find your light at the end of the tunnel. I found mine.
Welcome to Live and Local. I'm your host, Brian McConnell. This is a talk show discussing the people, events, and organizations affecting the Iowa City area. You've just got a little taste of Prelude, and today we're joined by Ron Berg, the CEO of Prelude Behavioral Services. And first of all, just introduce yourself, a little background on you. And
Sure, okay. As you said, my name is Ron Berg. I'm the CEO of Prelude Behavioral Services. I've been with Prelude since 1981, came to Iowa City for graduate school like a lot of other people. Expected to be here until that was finished and fell in love with the community and never left. So
that's great.
Glad to still be here.
So it's kind of an interesting story. How did you directly get involved with what was then Mecca?
Yeah, started in 1981 as a practicum student with Mecca in our halfway house, and had an opportunity to work in a couple different areas. We actually we started an employee assistance program that is still going today. We contract through the EAP with about 25 area businesses providing support to employees. Worked in some outpatient operations, and then in 2010 an opportunity came up for me to move into this position, so I was glad to be able to do that.
Great.
So it's been a fun time.
So now I guess just like a 30,000 foot view,
Sure.
What is Prelude?
Okay. Prelude is a CARF-accredited behavioral health organization that specializes in providing addiction treatment services. So in our addiction treatment, we provide, we would call it the full range of care, so outpatient, residential, halfway house, and detoxification, all here in Iowa City. We also have very similar operations in Des Moines as well. Right now, about half of our clients are in Iowa City and half of our clients are in the Des Moines office. And then the final piece that we have here for treatment support is a transitional housing program. We have 12 transitional housing apartments that our families can move into for an additional 2 years of support as they get things organized and under their feet. And then we also do a lot of prevention work. We have a very active prevention staff working in 4 counties here: Cedar, Iowa, Johnson, and Washington County. We work with coalitions, with businesses, with parent groups, government organizations, trying to improve the health status related to addictions in the 4 counties we serve.
So what is your territory exactly?
Yeah, here in eastern Iowa, it's again the 4 counties: Cedar, Iowa, Johnson, and Washington, and then we also have operations in Polk County in central Iowa.
Okay. How does this start? For one, like if, whether it's a family member or somebody you know, how do they get involved? How do they get in touch? And what's that process like?
Sure. There's, you can get involved in several different ways. About half of our clients come to us as a voluntary client. But that usually means someone in their life has expressed concerns about their use of alcohol or drugs, and then encourages them to get involved with us. So they come down and have an evaluation. Everything starts with an evaluation. We do walk-in appointments Monday through Friday, morning and afternoon. So you can walk in the door and we will see you that day. If we can't see you during that walk-in time, we'll make something work out that's convenient for you. But we complete an evaluation and ask the question, what sort of treatment, if any, is best suited to meet your needs. So we are very individual in how we provide services, not expecting everybody to go through the same process, but wanting to find that right path that fits you. And then working with you, we listen to the goals that you have and try to put together a plan that will help accomplish those goals.
Is there a cost for that initial consultation?
There is. There's a cost for all of our services. We have several different ways that can be paid for. Clients that have Medicaid are able to use that benefit to pay for services. Clients that meet income guidelines, technically it's 200% of poverty or below, can receive financial assistance. And then we also accept, a lot of clients have Blue Cross, Blue Shield, Wellmark coverage, other employer coverages as well. And then people who are above the poverty level but don't have other health insurance, then we work with you, put you on a self-pay plan, and we work with you to make that affordable for you.
Okay. So what are the different treatment processes?
Well, we would call them levels of care.
Okay.
So you think about intensity of care. So the most intense would be our residential program. In Iowa City, we have 32 beds for residential and 6 beds for detoxification. And in residential, you live with us. You are involved in programming starting at about 7 o'clock in the morning and ending about 10 o'clock at night. Part of that time there is some downtime through the day, but it's a mix of group counseling, some individual counseling. There will be some recreation time that's in there. We have clients work on assignments, that there would be some time for that as well. And then, you're in a group living situation, so you have a lot of community duties. So people pitch in to help clean up after lunch and so on, that sort of thing. So that's residential, and that's usually between 20 to 30 days that somebody would be in residential. And then when you have reached a point where you've met the initial goals, then you could step down to a halfway house, where you're involved in programming really only about 5 to 10 hours a week. The rest of the time you are out in the community looking for work, getting involved in education and so on, but then still living there. You also can step down to outpatient. We have 2 levels of outpatient care. In intensive outpatient, which is about 10 hours a week, and then a lower level, which can be anything less than 10 hours. So it might be 1 hour every other week. It might be 3 to 4 hours. And that's a combination, again, of individual counseling and group counseling.
And you said about 50% of your clients are voluntary.
Yeah.
So the other 50%, how are those fed?
The other 50% are coming from the court or their attorney. Employers make referrals, physicians make referrals. So those would be the other types of referral sources that we have. And that's changed, from when I first started at Prelude, where the majority of times folks were involved with the criminal justice system, and that really has changed over time. And part of the reason for that I attribute to our prevention program, where people are just more aware of addictions and more aware of the treatment options. We still have a lot of work to do around stigma, but I think we've made some movement on that part, where stigma isn't quite as a large a barrier to overcome as it maybe was 30 years ago.
Yeah, I think there has been a shift in, substance abuse as more of a mental illness, and the acceptance of that probably leads to the higher percentage of people volunteering.
Yep.
So
I think so.
So just to get back a little bit to the basics, so people familiar with the area know of it as Mecca.
Sure.
So, and now it's Prelude. Can
Yeah.
you just kind of speak to that a little bit?
Sure. We've been Mecca for, since the early 70s. We actually, prior to that, in 1969, we were known as the Johnson County Council on Alcoholism, and did a lot of outreach in the jail and the prisons in the state trying to get people involved with Alcoholics Anonymous. Then we were the Mideastern Community Council on Alcoholism. And as the treatment field started to recognize that alcoholism and drug addiction had a lot of similarities, we went from Council on Alcoholism to Community Council on Chemical Abuse. So we went from alcoholism to chemical abuse. And as the board looked at where we're headed in the future, where treatment services are moving, we realized that Mecca didn't really communicate anything about where we're headed, didn't communicate a message of hope or beginning like we think Prelude does. And in addition to that, people were confused about what Mecca meant. They just didn't understand. So we made the decision to go ahead and change our name and worked with a group to help us come up with Prelude. And it's been very well received.
Yeah.
People are excited about the change, a new look for the organization. So it's a change, but I think we're excited about it. It's been a good move for us.
As I mentioned to you, I was in a class with Sandy.
Sure.
And we're the CLP with the Chamber of Commerce, and she was talking about the transition of the name. But I think the group of us there for lunch kind of thought that did have a nice ring to it, you know, and just the Prelude. It's kind of a bit of a new beginning. So
yeah, it's kind of interesting when you tell people the name is Prelude. There's always a pause, and then they go, "Oh, I get it."
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah.
Earlier you spoke about like EAP and other things. What other organizations do you work with? Do you?
Yeah, boy, that's a long list. I was thinking.
What is EAP?
Employee Assistance Program.
Okay.
Employee assistance programs are pretty common across the country. We were the first to get it started here in the Iowa City area. We've been working with quite a few employers here in the area since the mid-1980s to late 1980s. And that's an early intervention program where it's available to employees on a voluntary basis, or their supervisor can say, I'm concerned about what's going on here at work. Let's make sure it isn't something in your personal life that's interfering at work. So it's just another resource for the employee and the employer as well to try and make sure that they keep the good employees working for them. Other places that we're involved with, United Action for Youth, Neighborhood Centers of Johnson County, Big Brothers Big Sisters. We've been heavily involved for a long, long time with Johnson County. They provide support for some of our prevention programming as well as our detoxification program. The transitional housing apartments that I mentioned, that was a nice partnership with City of Iowa City to help get it built originally, and then working with Steve Rackus and this Housing Authority to provide support for the rent. That's an ongoing partnership. We continue to work closely with Janet Linus and Lonnie Polkravic and finding alternatives to jail, finding treatment alternatives. So a long, long list of community partners that we've been involved with over time that we greatly appreciate their support.
So we alluded to this a little bit earlier, but talk about the connection between mental illness and substance abuse and how they tie together.
Yeah, that's continues to evolve. At one point there was a debate. If you had an addiction as well as a mental illness, which one should you treat first? And we thankfully quickly learned that just doesn't make sense. We need to treat them both together. There are different diagnoses in the medical literature, but it's really hard to tease the two of them apart in a lot of cases where, someone who has some depressed mood, that might be made worse by the substance they're using. Same if it's, if they're hyperactive or using methamphetamine. Sometimes it's a little hard to distinguish, is it a mental illness or is it a drug? So we need to work closely with the multiple number of providers, their healthcare provider, their mental health therapist, and we also have licensed mental health therapists on our staff that can treat both illnesses at the same time. So that's a direction that the field is moving. I think we'll see more and more of that as we go along.
What type of success rates do you see? I mean, I don't know how easy it is to quantify that and the follow-up.
Sure. Well, we do exit surveys with clients, and what they tell us as they leave, about 90% say they now have a hope for their future. They tell us that their employment has improved, their family relationships have improved, their work relationships, employment status, housing status, health status, all of those areas, between 70 and 90% of our clients are saying those areas have improved for them. The one that's I'm most excited about is that 90% saying they now have hope for the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we also understand better now that addiction can be a series of treatments. Where somebody who is, let's say they're struggling with diabetes, trying to control their diabetes, and if they went off their diet, we wouldn't say that they failed their treatment. we would get them re-engaged in
Right.
services. And it's the same with addictions. When somebody goes back to using, we like to see that as short as possible. We want to stay engaged with the client so they get back involved in services and get back on pursuing their goals. So rather than talking like we did in the past that 60% or 20% or whatever the percent are abstinent, we talk about the improvement in their life, trying to address some of that shame that might be there when a relapse would occur that might prevent them from getting back involved in services, make that use a little longer when it really doesn't need to be. So,
Right.
so our clients are telling us that they benefit greatly from our services, and we're happy about that. We think
That's
we do a
great.
good job.
So, a lot has been in the news in the last couple of years about medical use of marijuana or legalization
Sure.
of that. I guess what would be Prelude's stance on that? Or
Well, several points with that. One, I think we've got way too many drugs floating around out here now. Take OxyContin, for example. It is a drug, a painkiller that is very beneficial for a lot of people, and it is
had to use it.
and it can be highly abused. It is one of the drugs that leads to heroin addiction, opioid addictions. So my concern with the medical marijuana, while it has medical benefits, or it seems that that's the case, I don't want to prevent someone from having the benefit of a drug for their condition. But as we move towards legalizing that or making it available as a medical treatment, I hope that we can learn from our mistakes in the past and also address and recognize that it does have some abuse potential. Just from a simple numbers game, if marijuana is more available, there will be more people who use it, and about 10% of the people who use marijuana are going to experience some trouble with it at some point. So how do we take advantage of the medical benefits and also address and be aware of the potential abuse? That, I think, is the discussion that we really need to be having.
Is that percentage consistent with other legal drugs?
That's a good question, and I'm not sure the answer to that, Brian. I haven't seen any research that would, address that question specifically.
Okay.
So.
What are a few things that people watching this on PATV, what would you want them to take away from this?
Well, first of all, that there is hope, that recovery happens. People can change their pattern of use and get on with other things in their life. Too often, I think addiction is cast in a very discouraging, negative light. But what we see at Prelude is all the hope and the change and the improvement. And I would hope that people would take that away from the discussion today. That whether it's getting help at Prelude or getting help through AA or NA, people shouldn't feel discouraged about reaching out and getting involved in some help to make some changes, because it happens.
Yeah, I think as we've interviewed several different organizations, whether it's domestic violence, whether it's mental health, which again ties in closely with substance abuse, but I do feel like the atmosphere is changing a little bit. It's a little more socially acceptable to be able to admit those problems and then pursue help and make a better life. And that's really what you guys are trying to do.
Yeah, very much. You asked about partnerships. One of our earlier partnerships was with Pat White at the county attorney's office when he began requiring people who were arrested for drunk driving to come in for an evaluation. That was an early intervention. Instead of putting people in jail, it's the first jail alternative program, and now that's the state law that's practiced. And I think that contributes to this better understanding about getting involved in getting treatment for addictions.
So as part of Prelude, do you also have services for the family members?
Yeah, we're trying to make that a little better known. We want to expand what we do for families whose loved ones are involved in treatment, but also we have staff available to meet with families who just are concerned their loved one may not be in services, and they don't know how to get started. So, come in and we can talk with the staff. We can give you some education about addictions itself, as well as talk about resources. help you kind of identify what the goals are that you want to achieve working with your loved one. Maybe we can identify some things that you're doing that are counterproductive to what you're trying to accomplish. So yeah, we have that available. We encourage people to come in and talk with us and try to figure out how to get started.
Okay. Paint a little picture, I guess, about, for when you talk about, you have the detox services, and then you have the residential program. People are there from 7 a.m. until, or they're there all day, but starting at 7 until 10 p.m. What's a day look like?
Well, you would get up, you would have your breakfast, you help prepare breakfast. Then there would be some cleanup, there would be some meditation time where we just let the clients have some quiet time to kind of get themselves organized, their thoughts clear and get started. And then, you know, there's a variety of different groups that would happen during the day. Some of them are, you know, us giving you information about substances. What happens when you ingest marijuana? What happens when you drink alcohol physically to your body? So just some basic education. What's some education about a healthy diet, for example? And then there's also some therapy that's about you know, behavior change. So we talk about cognitive behavioral therapy or motivational enhancement work with the clients, where we're actually helping clients kind of challenge their assumptions. We all develop patterns of relating and responding to one another, and sometimes those patterns aren't helpful to us. So we help give them some new tools, different ways to respond to one another. And then there would be time to meet with your individual counselor. Part of that time is looking at what are your treatment goals, what do you want to accomplish both now and then, you know, over the next 12 months. For people specifically in residential, we would be looking at what their aftercare plan is going to be when they leave residential, what sort of supports are they going to need, looking at employment, education, and so on. So working with your individual counselor to identify those goals and what steps you can take to complete
So I imagine there's some challenges when you have, I don't know, how many beds did you say you have?
32.
What challenges does that bring up, having people who are struggling with different addictions and mental illness?
Well, you know, you take 32 people, adults, and you put them in a close space and take away their primary coping mechanism, then you can actually start to learn some things. So,
yeah.
You know, but what the clients say as they leave, the best things, the things that they speak most highly about is the care that they receive from the staff. That's without exception across the board. The clients talk about the care and support they get from the staff, but also the support that they get from the clients, the other clients as well. So, you know, it can be a stressful day, but at the end of it all, clients realize how beneficial that has been to them. So,
what are some of the most commonly abused or used substances? Obviously, you've spoke to alcohol, but or you know, what's on the horizon?
Well, first of all, alcohol is the most abused, most common problem that our clients report. You know, we hear a lot in the media about methamphetamine, heroin, marijuana, and so on, but alcohol is far and away the biggest issue that our clients have. Second, methamphetamine and marijuana kind of switch place between second and third over time. Cocaine has been up in the top three. What's on the horizon? We hope it isn't on the horizon too much, but recently there's been an uptick in heroin use.
Yeah, I've seen opioid.
News. Yeah. You know, we don't have anything in Iowa like we hear about on the East Coast, where, you know, the majority of clients are reporting heroin problems. Across the state, it's about 5% of the clients, and that's up from 2 or 3%. So we've doubled it, but still nothing like we have on the coast.
So, you know, you talked about, and I think you put it in a good perspective, you have these people, you take away their main coping mechanism.
Yeah.
How do you treat the individual as far as one's on methamphetamines, one's alcohol? Is it treated similarly, or?
Yeah, you know, that's a piece where we do some education about the specific drugs that helps that client understand their drug of choice and how it's affecting them. But in the bottom bottom line, it's still about how do I relate to one another, relate to my loved ones without using that drug. And that really doesn't matter what type of drug it is. So those skills apply across the board. There's some specific learning about a drug that can be helpful to clients. So we don't have a methamphetamine group or a marijuana group.
I got you. So
everybody's
it is
together.
all together.
Yep.
Just
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
What are some, obviously respecting anonymity, of course, what are some success stories that you've seen?
Yeah. Well, you asked about success and how do we calculate that. There's one person that I'm thinking about who had been in our outpatient, was successful in outpatient, and then began using again, returned a couple times and ended up in our residential program. From residential, she went into our halfway program, and then from there transitioned into our transitional housing program and stayed there for a couple of years. So over several years of this person's life, we were involved at several different stages. And when they left transitional housing, they had regained custody of their child. We're no longer involved with the courts, so there wasn't a court cost. We're no longer involved with DHS, so there wasn't the cost of DHS being involved in her life. She had completed her education. She had increased her earning power, and she had a professional job and is living independently with her child in the community now. And that's typically what we see. It takes, some people have a shorter path, some people have a longer path, but we see a lot of success and recovery.
It's really neat. You just mentioned like custody of children. Beyond the family services as like maybe the person who referred them, is what happens if somebody goes into treatment and they do have children that need to be looked after?
Yeah. If you're coming to Prelude, you would look to family members to care for the child while you're there. There are programs in the state that will take young children with a parent. Then we can help folks access those programs, but we don't have that type of service with us specifically.
Okay. I guess we just have about a minute or so left. Any kind of last things that you want to say? Any upcoming events? Anything that?
This is Recovery Month. We're celebrating that. I think it's National Prevention Week. So that's exciting. We've got a lot of activity going on around that. And I think, watching in the future, we are evaluating our facilities and looking at what we can do to address some of the issues that I mentioned. I think understanding that what we save the community in terms of the legal costs and the medical costs and so on, I think that's important that I'd like people to understand that.
Any events coming up with the recent name change from Mecca to Prelude that we can promote or anything?
Nothing more at this point. We made that effective January, and we're kind of getting on with it. So,
well, I tell you what, Ron, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, learning more about Prelude, and thank you for what you do and for your services, and we really appreciate you being on the show today.
Great. Well, thanks for having us. I look forward to talking about it as any chance I can.
Absolutely. So. For Live and Local, I'm your host, Brian McConnell. Thank you very much for watching, and be sure to tune in every Wednesday night for the latest episode of Live and Local on Channel 18 PATV, your neighborhood network. Again, thank you very much for watching.